All right, so today we're diving into something pretty interesting, the world of singles in America.
Okay.
You've given us some really great research here, and it looks at how age and location play a huge role
Yeah.
in the single scene. Really goes way beyond, those typical headlines you always see about, cities overflowing with single women.
Right.
And trust me, some of these findings we're going to go over,
Mm-hmm.
they might surprise you.
Absolutely. It is fascinating how much the narrative changes when you start looking at the data
Yeah.
through, the lens of different age groups and
Right.
different parts of the country.
Exactly, and that's what's so cool about all this research.
You ready to dive in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Welcome to Gender Decoded, where numbers align, seeing the stories that data defines. Breaking the barriers, truth untold, insights in gender, the data force.
Okay, so we've all seen these singles maps online, right? Like the ones that say they show you the best cities to find a partner.
Right.
Some people say New York's like overflowing with single women. Others say smaller cities are like hidden gems for finding single men. But like how much of that's actually true?
Yeah.
That's what we're going to be looking at today.
Okay.
We get this super interesting article, and it's debunking all these myths about where to find love.
Okay.
And it gets into like the real stuff that shapes the dating scene, like all across America.
Gotcha.
So whether you're out there looking for love or you're happily like coupled up,
Mm.
this is going to be a fascinating look at like how demographics and geography play a role like in all our romantic lives.
Yeah, it's really intriguing how these maps like play into that universal desire to find love,
Right.
And it seems so simple. Like finding the one is as easy as like booking a plane ticket, right?
Right.
But it's
way more complicated.
way more complicated than that.
Exactly. And this article, it starts by taking us back to 2006
Okay.
when, do you remember that singles map that went viral?
Oh,
It said
yeah.
New York City was like a single woman's paradise.
Yeah,
Because it had way more single women than men. Do you remember that?
absolutely. Absolutely. That map started so many conversations, probably inspired a few moves, I bet.
Yeah, I bet so too.
But as this article points out,
Yeah.
it was using like really flawed data.
Really? Okay, so what was wrong with the 2006 map?
Uh-huh.
Like, how is it flawed?
The biggest problem was that they put like all single adults, 20 to 64 years old, all in the same group.
Oh, wow.
So you're talking about like apples and oranges here.
Yeah.
A 20-year-old is looking for something completely different than
Okay.
someone who's 60.
Right, right.
Hey.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It's like saying, the produce section at the grocery store is full of apples just because you see a few Granny Smiths.
Exactly. And on top of that, the map didn't even take into account like population size.
Oh, interesting.
So a small town, even with just like a couple thousand extra single women, would look the same on the map as a city
Wow.
with
That's crazy.
tens of thousands.
So it wasn't really giving us a good picture at all.
Not at all.
Like, it's so weird how something that seems so easy,
I know.
like counting single people can be, like, so misleading.
It really shows,
Yeah.
how important accurate data is and the right kind of analysis,
Yeah.
especially for something as complex as love and relationships.
Right. Okay, so after that, did anyone try to make a better singles map?
They did. Thankfully, by 2013, the Census Bureau put out much more detailed data on singles in America.
Awesome,
And
Jack.
this data,
So now we can actually look at...
we can look at it by age.
Yeah, okay, cool. So now we're getting a much, much clearer picture.
Much clear.
Okay, so I'm really curious now.
Yeah.
What does the new data say? Like, where are the single hotspots?
So the first thing you notice is that it's totally different depending on your age.
Okay.
So let's start with like young adults, the 20 to 39-year-olds.
Okay. Yeah, so in their 20s and 30s, what's the story there?
Yeah.
I'm guessing it's not as simple as that old 2006 map made it seem.
No, not at all. Not at all. And this data actually shows something really surprising.
What's that?
Most major cities in America, they have more single men in their 20s and early 30s.
Wait, really? Even New York City?
Yeah, yeah.
I always thought it was like a single woman's paradise,
It's a myth that just won't go away.
right?
But when you look at the numbers and you adjust for population size,
Yeah.
there are more single men
Wow.
in their 20s and early 30s in New York City.
Okay, that's a pretty big revelation. It seems like that 2006 map really like messed with our view of New York.
Definitely.
But even if there are more single men in those cities, it doesn't mean it's like easy to find a partner.
Right. Yeah, we're talking about like really broad statistical trends here.
Yeah.
There's so many other factors that come in
Yeah.
when you're actually out there trying to date
Right.
in a city like New York.
Okay, so it's not just about the numbers.
Right.
Like, what are some of the other things
Well,
that people should think about?
for young adults in these competitive cities, things like
Yeah.
career ambitions,
Mhm.
social circles, even just the fast-paced lifestyle,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, I could see that.
that all comes into play.
So even if a city has more single men, it might not feel like it if everyone is like working all the time and focused on their careers.
Yeah.
It's really interesting how those like social things
Mm-hmm.
can like make such a difference even when the numbers tell a different story.
For sure.
Okay.
Now, most cities show this trend of more single men in their 20s and 30s, but this article mentions
Yeah.
a few interesting exceptions.
Oh, really? What are those?
Places like Jackson, Mississippi,
Okay.
and Savannah, Georgia,
Okay.
they actually have more single women in that age range.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting.
Yeah,
What makes those southern cities different?
that's a good question. And
Yeah.
the article gives a few possibilities, like it could be related to changes in population after Hurricane Katrina,
Oh.
but it's also possible that local economic factors and traditions
Yeah.
are playing a role too. Like maybe certain industries in Jackson are attracting more young women,
Yeah.
or maybe there are social norms
Right.
that affect when people get married in that region.
Right. It would be so cool to like learn more about that
Definitely.
and hear from the people who actually live there.
It would be,
Get your perspective.
yeah, totally.
Okay, that's a good reminder that like even though those national trends are interesting,
Mm-hmm.
the like local stuff can really shape your experience in a specific place. Okay, but before we go too far down that road, let's get back to the age thing.
Yeah.
What happens to that surplus of single men as they get older?
Yeah.
Does it stay the same?
That's where it gets even more interesting. So as we go into the late 30s and 40s,
Okay.
we start to see some changes.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Mm-hmm.
What happens as we get past those younger years?
So in a lot of cities, that gap between single men and women, it kind of starts to shrink.
Okay.
The data shows that men's advantage,
Mhm.
it slowly goes down as people get to their late 30s and 40s.
So things start to like even out a bit.
Kind of, yeah. But there's still some differences depending on where you are.
Oh, okay.
For example, some areas like parts of California,
Mm-hmm.
the Pacific Northwest, and a few big cities, they tend to have a slightly higher ratio of single men,
Okay.
even as people get into their late 40s.
So even when we're older, location still matters.
Yeah.
It's not just about how old you are. It's about where you are in the country. Makes you wonder, like, about all the different things that cause those differences, you know?
Totally. And speaking of differences, get this.
Yeah.
Once we get to the 50s and beyond,
Mm-hmm.
there's a huge flip in the singles map.
Oh, wow. Okay, I am ready for this. Tell me about this flip.
Well, after 50,
Yeah.
almost every city in America has way more single women.
Wow. That is a big change. So
Yeah.
what's going on? Why is there such a difference after 50?
It's a few things together.
Okay.
Part of it is biology. You know, women live longer than men.
Yeah.
So naturally, as we get older,
Yeah.
there are just more women alive in those older age groups.
Right, that makes sense. But it's not just about living longer,
Yeah.
right? There are other reasons why there are so many single women over 50.
Yeah, like social patterns
Okay.
have a big impact.
How so?
For example, men who get divorced are more likely to get married again
Oh, okay.
than women who get divorced. So over time, there are just fewer single men available in those older age groups.
So that women live longer.
Mm-hmm.
And
And men are more likely to get remarried.
okay, that's really interesting. And those trends, they actually change how people experience dating at different ages, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's break it down.
Okay.
What does this mean for men and women who are like actually out there dating?
Well,
for these different numbers?
let's start with the guys.
Okay.
For young men.
Yeah.
Even though the data shows them having an advantage in a lot of cities,
Mm-hmm.
dating can feel really competitive.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in a big city
Yeah.
with tons of people who are, ambitious and attractive.
Mm-hmm.
Even if there are more single men, it's probably still hard to, stand out.
Exactly. And the article, it actually talks about how that competition
Yeah.
can be really intense in
Yeah.
those big cities where there's just so many single people who are really focused on their careers and being successful. So
Yeah.
even with the advantage, young men might not feel like they have an advantage.
Right. It's kind of like that saying, it's a jungle out there.
Yeah, totally.
But even though the big cities are tough, it sounds like, there are some places where young men might have a better chance statistically.
That's right, yeah. The article, it points to a few smaller cities in the South,
Okay.
like Jackson, Mississippi, or Savannah, Georgia,
Oh, okay.
where there's more single women under 30.
Okay.
So for men who are set on being somewhere with a higher ratio of single women their age,
Yeah.
those cities might be worth checking out.
That's interesting. I'm sure it's not as simple as just moving to a city with better numbers, though. Right?
Oh, yeah, you're
Yeah.
totally right. The article actually warns against just moving based on demographics.
Yeah.
It's really important to think about the social and cultural context of a place.
Right?
These smaller cities, they often have their own,
Yeah.
ways of dating and connecting with people. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
They might be really tight-knit communities,
Mm-hmm.
which is great if you fit in,
Yeah.
but it can be hard if you're an outsider.
So it's a trade-off.
Exactly.
Maybe more single women, but maybe a harder time, socially.
Exactly. And then as men get into their late 30s and 40s,
Yeah.
they might find that things are a little more balanced,
Okay.
especially in those cities where
Yeah.
there were more single men at first,
Okay.
and that gap starts to even out.
So a little less pressure as they get older.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But then we get to the 50s,
Yeah.
and things switch again.
Yeah. Yeah.
This time it's the guy's turn.
Right.
Remember that big flip we were talking about?
Yeah.
Where there are suddenly more single women in most cities?
Oh, yeah. That was a big one. It makes you think about how that impacts dating for both men and women, in that age group.
Totally. Well,
Yeah.
for men over 50,
Yeah.
this change can make dating a totally different experience
Yeah.
than what they were used to when they were younger.
So it's like the tables have turned.
Yeah.
They go from feeling the pressure of competition
Mm-hmm.
in their 20s and 30s,
Right.
and then all of a sudden they have the advantage.
Right. It doesn't mean, that all men over 50 are suddenly irresistible.
Right, of course. Of course.
Dating is complicated.
Right.
And attraction depends on way more than just age and numbers.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
It's never that simple.
Yeah.
But it's still really cool to think about how these changes,
Yeah.
how they create
Yeah.
such different experiences for people at different ages.
For sure. Okay, so we talked about the guys.
Yeah.
What about the women?
Yeah, yeah. What about the women? We
Mm.
know that young women often feel like they're outnumbered,
Yeah.
even if the data shows there are more single men.
Right. That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And as we said before,
Yeah.
it could be because men tend to get married later.
Okay.
So even if there are technically more single men in total,
Yeah.
they might not be ready to settle down
Yeah.
at the same time as the women their age.
Right. So it's not just about the numbers, it's about timing
Exactly.
and when people are ready for different things in their relationships.
Totally. And then there's the fact that as people start pairing off,
Yeah.
social circles start to shrink.
That's true. Yeah.
As your friends get married or coupled up,
Yeah.
it can feel like there are fewer people to date,
Yeah.
even if that's not totally true statistically.
Right. It's like your dating pool gets smaller even if the overall numbers haven't really changed.
Exactly. Now, as women get into their 40s and 50s,
Yeah.
they start to see things shift in their favor.
Yeah.
In most cities.
Yeah.
There are more single women than men after 40.
So the numbers are on their side. But does
Mhm.
that mean that dating is easier for them? I'm guessing it's not always that simple.
Yeah, I think it's good to be skeptical.
Yeah.
While the numbers might look good,
Yeah.
older women often face different challenges when they're dating.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
We live in a society that puts a lot of emphasis on being young.
Yeah.
Especially for women. It makes you wonder if those expectations are keeping up with how things are actually changing.
It's a great point.
Yeah.
And, the article mentioned this thing called the cougar trend,
Oh yeah.
where older women are looking for relationships with younger men.
Mhm.
And it suggests that this trend could be partly because of this demographic shift.
Interesting. So as the numbers change, maybe social norms change too.
Yeah,
It's cool to think about how these demographic trends could be affecting how we think about age and relationships.
for sure, for sure. And that brings us back to the main point.
Okay.
The singles map is always changing
Yeah.
as social norms shift
Yeah.
and demographics go up and down and
Yeah.
people make their own choices.
Yeah.
The landscape of love is always changing too.
It's like a living, breathing thing, this singles map.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing to think about how all these things work together
Mm-hmm.
to create the dating world we experience.
Yeah.
Okay, so where does that leave us?
Mm-hmm.
What's the big takeaway for our listeners who are out there dating?
I think the most important thing to remember is that these demographic patterns and singles maps,
Yeah.
they're usable,
Yeah.
but they shouldn't be taken as like the absolute truth.
Okay.
They give us a glimpse into the bigger trends,
Yeah.
but they can't predict what'll happen to any one person.
Right. No map, no matter how good it is,
Yeah.
can tell you exactly where you'll find love.
Right.
Or who you'll connect with.
Love is,
Yeah.
it's a journey, you know?
Yeah.
It's shaped by the choices we make and the people we meet by chance.
Yeah.
And that spark of connection that you just can't measure with statistics.
Right. So the singles map can be fun,
Uh-huh.
and it can be interesting,
Definitely.
but it's not a magic crystal ball, you know?
Yeah,
Can't tell you who to date or where to move to find love.
exactly. However,
Yeah.
understanding these trends, it can give you a new perspective on how things work.
Yeah.
It can help you understand the bigger picture, challenge your assumptions,
Mm.
and maybe even start some interesting conversations.
Totally. So for everyone listening,
Yeah.
we encourage you to check out the singles map for your city,
Mm-hmm.
see what it says about your local dating scene,
Yeah.
and then think about how those bigger trends might be affecting your own life.
For sure.
What makes your dating experience unique?
Yeah.
What cultural norms are you seeing? And most importantly, what does your personal map of love look like?
Remember, no map can predict your love life.
Right.
But knowing about these trends,
Yeah.
it might give you a fresh perspective and a new appreciation for how complicated love is in today's world.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the singles map of America.
Thanks for having me.
We hope you enjoyed exploring these trends with us. Until next time, happy dating.